In 18 years of judging talent shows, Simon Cowell had never answered his phone during a live audition. Never. His phone was always on silent, tucked away in his jacket pocket, completely off-limits during filming. It was one of his most sacred rules. Total focus on the contestants. No distractions, no interruptions. But when 19-year-old Marcus Thompson was halfway through his audition on Britain's Got Talent, Simon's phone began ringing with a tone he'd only heard 3 times in his entire life. And what he did next broke every rule of television production and revealed a side of Simon Cowell that nobody knew existed. The London Palladium was alive with typical Saturday evening energy. The audience was engaged, the judges were alert, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Simon sat at his familiar position at the judges' table, wearing his signature black t-shirt, arms crossed in that practiced pose of professional assessment. After 18 years in this business, he had developed an almost supernatural ability to read contestants within seconds of their appearance. Marcus Thompson had just stepped onto the stage, guitar in hand, radiating the nervous confidence of a young man with big dreams and limited resources. At 19, he was tall and lean, with kind eyes and calloused fingers that spoke of countless hours practicing on a guitar that had clearly seen better days. His clothes were clean but worn, jeans that had been mended, a button-down shirt that was pressed but frayed at the collar. "Hello there," Amanda Holden called out warmly. "What's your name?" "Marcus Thompson," he replied, adjusting his guitar strap nervously. "I'm from Manchester." "And what brings you to BGT today, Marcus?" David Walliams asked. Marcus took a deep breath, the kind that suggested he was about to share something significant. "I'm here because music saved my life, and I want to show people that no matter where you come from, no matter what's happened to you, you can still create something beautiful." Alicia Dixon leaned forward with interest. "Tell us a bit about your story, Marcus." "I grew up in foster care," Marcus said simply. "Been in the system since I was 6. Had some rough placements, some good ones, but the one constant in my life has been music. When everything else fell apart, I had my guitar." Simon's attention sharpened. There was something in Marcus's demeanor, a combination of vulnerability and strength that reminded him of contestants who had gone on to do extraordinary things. "What song are you going to perform for us today?" Amanda asked. "I wrote this song myself," Marcus said, positioning his guitar. "It's called Letters to Nobody. It's about all the things you want to say to people who aren't there to hear them anymore." Marcus began to play, and immediately it was clear that he wasn't just talented, he was special. His guitar work was intricate but not showy, his voice was raw but controlled, and the lyrics were devastatingly honest. He sang about writing letters to parents he'd never known, to foster siblings who'd been moved to different homes, to social workers who'd believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. The audience was completely captivated. Amanda was visibly moved, David was nodding along appreciatively. Alicia had that look she got when she knew she was witnessing something extraordinary. And Simon was leaning forward, completely absorbed in the performance. That's when his phone rang. Not the subtle buzz of a text message or the gentle chime of a notification. A full, loud ringtone that cut through Marcus's performance like a knife through silk. The tone was distinctive, a simple, urgent sound that Simon had programmed years ago for only the most important calls. Marcus faltered for just a moment, his fingers stumbling over the guitar strings. The audience stirred uncomfortably. The other judges looked at Simon with expressions of shock and mild annoyance. In 18 years of BGT, nothing like this had ever happened. Simon's face went white. He reached into his jacket pocket and looked at his phone screen, and whatever he saw there made his expression change completely. This wasn't embarrassment or irritation. This was panic. "I have to take this," Simon said abruptly, standing up from his chair. His voice carried clearly through his wireless microphone, broadcasting his words to the entire venue. The production team was frantically gesturing from the control room. Amanda looked confused. David was making "what are you doing" faces. The audience was murmuring in bewilderment, and Marcus stood frozen on stage, his song interrupted, his big moment derailed by something unprecedented. But Simon wasn't looking at any of them. He was answering his phone. "Eric," Simon said into the device, his voice tight with concern. "What's wrong? Is she okay?" The entire Palladium could hear one side of a conversation that was clearly not meant for public consumption. Simon's face cycled through expressions of fear, relief, and then something deeper, a vulnerability that his television persona had never revealed. "How long ago?" Simon asked. "Is she asking for me?" Okay. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her Uncle Simon is coming right now." The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something deeply personal and important. Marcus had stopped playing entirely, still standing in the spotlight, but clearly understanding that something bigger than his audition was happening. Simon hung up the phone and looked around the venue as if suddenly remembering where he was. His eyes found Marcus on the stage. "Marcus," Simon said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so sorry. That was about my 8-year-old niece, and she's in the hospital, and she's asking for me, and I..." For 18 years, Simon Cowell had been the picture of professional composure. But in this moment, he was just an uncle who'd received a phone call that every family member dreads. "I have to go," Simon said, looking directly at Marcus. "But before I do, I need you to know something. What you were singing up there, that's not just talent, that's truth. That's the kind of honesty that changes people's lives." Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Is your niece going to be okay?" The question caught Simon off guard. Here was a young man whose own audition had been derailed, who should have been frustrated or disappointed, and instead he was asking about a stranger's well-being. "I don't know," Simon said honestly. "She was in a car accident 3 hours ago. She's been asking for me since she woke up, and I can't let her down." That's when Marcus did something that nobody expected. He began to play his guitar again. Not the song he'd been performing, but something gentler, more soothing, a simple melody that felt like a musical hug. "This is for your niece," Marcus said into his microphone. "For healing and for love, and for uncles who drop everything when they're needed." Simon stood there for a moment, listening to this young man who had turned his derailed audition into a gift of comfort for a family in crisis. Tears were streaming down his face without any attempt to hide them. "Thank you," Simon said simply. Then he turned to the other judges. "Give him whatever he needs. Golden buzzer, straight to the finals, whatever. But I have to go." And then Simon Cowell walked off the BGT stage in the middle of a live taping, something that had never happened in the show's history. But the story doesn't end there. 3 hours later, Simon arrived at the children's hospital, where his 8-year-old niece Emma was recovering from surgery to repair injuries from the car accident. She was awake, scared, and asking for the uncle who always made her laugh. "Uncle Simon," she said weakly when he walked into her room. "I knew you'd come." "Of course I came, sweetheart," Simon said, taking her small hand in his. "I'll always come when you need me." "The doctors said I might have to stay here for a long time," Emma said. "Will you visit me every day?" "Every single day," Simon promised. "And you know what? I met someone today who reminded me what's really important. He wrote a song about people who care about each other, and I think you'd like him." Emma smiled for the first time since the accident. "Will you tell me about him?" So Simon sat beside his niece's hospital bed and told her about Marcus Thompson, the young man who had turned a disrupted audition into a moment of grace. He told her about the song Letters to Nobody, and how sometimes the people who care about us most are the ones who show up when everything falls apart. The next week, when BGT resumed taping, Marcus was invited back to complete his audition, but before he performed, Simon had something to say. "Ladies and gentlemen," Simon announced to the audience, "I want to tell you about the most important phone call I've ever answered. Last week, during Marcus's audition, I received news that my niece had been in an accident. I broke every rule of television to answer that call, and I'm not sorry, because family comes first, always." He looked at Marcus, who was standing ready with his guitar. "But what I learned that day is that family isn't just blood. It's also the people who show kindness when they don't have to, who offer comfort when their own dreams are on the line." Marcus Thompson could have been angry that I disrupted his audition. Instead, he played a song for a little girl he'd never met, in a hospital room he'd never seen, because he understood that some moments are bigger than any competition. Marcus performed Letters to Nobody again, this time without interruption, and it was even more powerful than before. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the venue. Simon pressed his golden buzzer. "That's not just for your talent," Simon said. "That's for your character. That's for understanding that the most important performances happen when nobody's keeping score." Marcus went on to win BGT that season, but more importantly, he became a regular visitor to the children's hospital where Emma was recovering. He started a program bringing music to young patients, funded by the prize money and Simon's foundation. Emma made a full recovery and became one of Marcus's biggest fans. At his victory performance, she sat in the front row, wearing a t-shirt that read, "Uncle Simon's Niece," and holding a sign that said, "Thank you for the healing song." The phone call that disrupted Marcus's audition became the foundation of a friendship that changed both their lives. Because sometimes the most important interruptions are the ones that remind us what really matters. Not the performance, not the competition, not the rules we think we have to follow, but the people we love, and the compassion we show to strangers who become family. Simon still keeps his phone on during auditions, because he learned that day that some calls are too important to miss, and every time his ringtone sounds, he remembers a young man from Manchester who understood that real talent isn't just about what you can do with your voice or your instrument, it's about what you can do with your heart when someone needs healing. The most unexpected places, sometimes wearing a yellow dress and carrying a teddy bear, always offering exactly what we need most,